today's video, I'm going to be having a look at a bit of an IPO recap from this week. We're also going to be looking at why I'm still long tech and why we might be able to trade water futures in the near future. Hello and welcome to another acysecurities daily report video. My name is Alistair and I'm going to be your host through today's journey. Now, looking at some charts before we get right into it, I've identified here on the Aussie dollar what looks to be a double bottom near a point of support. So this might be a good opportunity to place a little trade to get on the way back up. The Aussie dollar saw a bit of a run down in the overnight session recently, obviously pertaining to what's gone on in the US quite recently as to what's actually gone on with stimulus and why we might not be getting one. So we've seen the US dollar appreciate in value a little bit off that news by about 0.1%. Now, moving on, a bit of an IPO recap. I mentioned earlier in the week that we were going to be seeing from C3.ai and DoorDash about whether or not how their IPOs were going to go and a bit of the discussion around that. We're also going to be hearing from Airbnb and a couple of others who are planning on listing sometime this week, possibly early next week. Now, DoorDash has done a pretty good job so far. They are something similar to like the Uber Eats app that many of us have on our phones, where they do deliver food to the door. Instead of having the urban environment, they also branched out to the suburban environment. So they do have a bit of a wider market focus, but nonetheless, they've done quite well. They are now listed on the NYSE as Dash, and they have had a 92% rise on the initial pop of IPO. They initially released 33 million shares. We've also seen the close at its highest price at $189 per share. So far in total, they've managed to raise $3.37 billion. So that is a lot of money for a company like this. I think they are probably going to see a little bit more performance out of it. But there are a couple of questions that come out of DoorDash. Why might a company like this not do so well post-pandemic? Obviously, throughout the pandemic, people's behaviors have changed. They're shifting towards the idea of getting food delivered so they can avoid contact with people who may potentially have COVID-19. Obviously, the one thing that's going to be hard to wrap around our heads is that the pandemic's not going to last forever. We do have some vaccines in the works. In fact, some of the first vaccines were given today. So this might alter their long-term prospects as to how they actually manage to travel along. Definitely something I'm going to keep an eye on though regardless, because I think there are some good qualities to DoorDash for the future. Now on C3.ai, they are obviously an artificial intelligence and cloud-based computing company dealing with a multi-market fit. A lot of companies will focus on the idea of focusing on just that one section of AI or tech that they require, as opposed to outsourcing a lot of the work. So this might be one of the ones to keep your eyes on much more closely as a tech option for the near future. Now, we've had 120% rise on the initial pop. They are listed under the NYSE ticker code AI, and we've had 15.5 million shares get released. So far, the highest price closing was $92, and we've also seen $651 million raised so far. Now, moving on to why I'm still long some tech, I'm looking at things that are based on that cloud computing and AI sort of software basis. Reason for it is that this shift in the pandemic was already happening. We had computer tech and AI, the cloud-based software companies, already on the rise well before the pandemic started. The vaccines and the pandemic aren't going to stop the digitization. Whilst we've seen a rotation throughout the pandemic focusing on the work from home sector, that doesn't mean that they're going to stay there. Whereas some of the companies that are focusing on the evolution of internet and of course computing and anything else related to the cloud and artificial intelligence are likely to continue to grow. So whilst I'm not long tech on everything, like I would look at like Tesla or perhaps some of the other metrics like Facebook, which are on the advertising path, am still focusing on some of the things that might see some significant improvement to the cloud resources that we get at this point in time. So keep an eye on some of those companies, have a look around, see what you can find around that area. I'm focusing mainly on ASX listed companies, but we might even have a bit of a video about what ones I'm looking at really fairly soon. Now moving on, water futures. This is something that's a first time event. It's the first kind of its contract ever made. CME have linked California's spot water market to a futures contract. Now they're also tied into what you see on the NASDAQ water index, but it is something that's very, very different. Now a lot of it is looking at the idea that water might become scarce. The reason being, obviously lots of bushfires, all the things that related to it. The contract itself details from what we see from the California spot index. So it is not looking at other places or other areas around the world. It is just simply in California. But it is still something that's interesting to look at. Each contract represents 10 acre-feet of water. And at this stage, there looks like there could be a number of potential participants. Obviously, Wall Street investors are keeping an eye on this. It's a new market, a new way of trading, or a new thing to trade. So we always keep an eye on those sort of things just because we have a general interest about it. It's what we do. It's why we're analysts. But there may also include some of the other participants that would likely be somewhere from the agricultural production side of things. Farmers, think of that sort of like nature, where they can actually see where water prices might be in 6 months' time and try and get cheaper water supply than just getting the spot price that they have been stiffed with all this time. Of course, water agencies and water utility companies are going to be fairly interested in this as well, seeing if they can bulk purchase large quantities and make a little bit of a gamble as to whether water is going to be cheaper down the track than what it is now. So it is something that is interesting. It is new. It is not the standard. It is sitting right alongside other commodities like gold and the rest of the like, but this is still something new, so be wary about if you are going to have a trade on it. I'm going to be watching this closer to see how it transpires. Naturally, if they all of a sudden decide to do a bottled water futures contract, I'll probably get involved in that because we all know how profitable bottled water actually is. Now, moving on to the news ahead of today. There is a lot of pound news coming out today from the UK at about 6 p.m. We have construction, GDP, trade balance, index of services, industrial production, and manufacturing, all at about the same time at 6 p.m. tonight, Australian Eastern Standard. So if you're trading the pound or the pound dollar or anything related, keep an eye on those because they might, even though they might be low impact, together they might have a bit of an impact that's a little bit more than you anticipate. Now, of course, we're also going to be hearing from the European Central Bank today, monetary policy, rate day, all those sort of things. So expect to hear from Christine Lagarde as well. And from there, later in tonight's session, we are getting US CPI figures. So that's all we have for today. Now, if you do have any interesting questions or want to get in touch with me, please feel free to shoot me an email at talktoal@acy.com. And don't forget to like and subscribe to this video so you can get more great content from me and ACY Securities in the future. Have a great trading day ahead.